Everyone is being overly dramatic about the reserve currency and the U.S. potentially losing it. One, the U.S. will eventually lose the reserve currency, and I'm fully fine with that. And when people worry about it, it gives me more assurance that I'm making better decisions, and here's why. The reserve currency, as you can see here, has been across many different countries in the last 500-600 years. Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, France, Great Britain, US. Can I ask you a question? Is Portugal a bigger economy today than it was 600 years ago? Absolutely. Spain, same thing. Netherlands, France, Great Britain, US. Every single one of these countries has issues today. Every single one of these countries has had huge issues in the last 500 years. Every single one of these countries continued to grow as time went on. Did they grow as fast as the US after they lost their reserve currency? No. Spoiler alert, we're not going to be the fastest growing country in the world. It's literally impossible. We are too wealthy to grow at high rates. Now, if you like what I'm saying here, I'm inviting you April 18th, free investment class. We're doing a webinar investment class, very simple, down below. It is for free, sign up. Back to the reserve currency. So all these countries have been the reserve currency. And I know you're gonna look at this going, oh, Portugal, big deal, Netherlands. But guess what? Back then, Portugal was awesome. So you might say to me, well, is the US gonna suck? I don't know. But I will say this. The US will be around and will be a growing economy. Are China and India growing much faster than us? Yes. Why is that though, Mo?
They have the capability to. They don't have the economic growth that we've had.
Correct. And they still have a ton of poor people. They have a ton of potential.
They have a ton of poor people. They have very remote areas that they can turn into westernized areas.
I'm going off my memory here, but I'm pretty sure India, the GDP per capita in India is $2,000 or $3,000 a person. China's around $10,000 or $12,000. The US, we're at $75,000 per person.
And they have the opportunity to get to that level.
Yes.
And we don't have the opportunity really to get to $150,000 per person.
Ready for this stat? At one point during our reserve currency, the US was 50% of the entire world's GDP. It is now 25%, give or take. Wow. Does that mean the US is worse because we occupy less? No, in fact, exactly the opposite. The US will do better as the rest of the world does better. I hope this goes down to 10%. Why? Guys, we're only 5% of the world's population, not even 5%. We're not even 5% of the world's population. We would hope that everybody in the world becomes so rich and so that we're going to grow with that. The pie is going to get bigger. Our percentage of that pie will be smaller, but our piece will still get bigger along with that pie. That is the big thing here. Portugal is still a much bigger economy today than it was back then. By the way, Portugal is a much bigger economy today than it was in 1920. Every single one of these countries has grown. But remember, when we became Great Britain had a much higher GDP per capita than us in 1750. But we grew faster. Why? Because we were so much smaller. So when I hear people complain about the reserve currency, you know what I imagine? I imagine it's like when people say to me, well, you know, the US isn't a democracy, it's really a republic. Ooh, good for you. Like, come on. Now, are there benefits to reserve currency? Absolutely. It helps lower interest costs. We don't have the exchange rate costs because when the reserve currency basically means every country in the world is going to hold a lot of our currency in their central banks. So it doesn't cost, we don't have the risk of the exchange rate costs because when we want to convert our money, it's right there immediately ready to go. And most commodities in the world will be priced in the reserve currency. Right. So we're going to get the best deal there on commodities. And as people hold our currency and our interest costs are going to be lower. So there are issues with losing the reserve currency. But everybody acts like China's going to come marching into our country and own us. Oh, and I love when people say like, well, you know what it's like? This is exactly what it's like. When I hear people complain about the reserve currency, I think of when people say, well, you know, you don't own your home. The bank owns your home. No, that's false. I own my home. The bank has a lien on the home, but I own my home. But people want to say these cute things to put, like they're splitting the atom going, look, aha. It's like, okay. We're going to lose the reserve currency. When? I have no idea. And when it does happen, I'm sure people will be scared for a while. And then guess what's going to happen?
Be back to normal.
Be back to normal. Because guess what? On September 11, 2001, 3 planes flew into our buildings and we thought we were under attack. And guess what happened?
You went back to normal.
We went back to normal eventually.
Again. Yeah.
And the economy grew and people grew and lives were lost and it sucked. But guess what? We went back to normal. We've had so many things happen, even when we weren't Look from 1800 to 1900, how much the U.S. economy grew. Spoiler alert, we weren't the reserve currency then. We weren't the reserve currency then. Great Britain grew, it was all great, but in 1920, we became the reserve currency, and everybody thinks that's like the most amazing thing ever. It's like, okay, there's benefits, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to diminish that. But I'm also trying to fight the excitement on the other side of like, oh my God, the world U.S. is gonna fail. No, the U.S. will be to me, the biggest threat to the U.S. are the laws we're putting in to inhibit entrepreneurship, the anti-immigration laws. Those things are what worry me. We have the world that's growing and people want to come to this country and we're making it harder for them to do that. I know people disagree with me on that one. That's what worries me more. I don't want to start losing people coming into our country. People are literally willing to die to come into our country. The day that changes, I'll be a little concerned. That's what worries me. And when I say worries me, it just makes me go, okay, there'll be a change of that. And I look at this thing saying, oh, come on, the reserve currency crap. Are we doing this again? Every so often, this pops up. I mean, I've been hearing this for what?
It's been a while.
20 years now?
It's been a while.
And at first I was like, oh my God, if we lose the reserve currency, we're done. And then I started to do more reading. And I'm like, no, we're going to be fine. Whenever somebody makes a statement like that, I think to myself, okay, what other countries have lost reserve currency? Well, the one before us, Great Britain. Have they done pretty well since 1920? Yeah. They've done really well since 1920.
Yeah.
And guess what? Probably the same thing will happen to us. We'll probably still do well. But if we keep increasing taxes, keep making government big, those are the issues we're going to have.
Right.
Not allow people to immigrate here who want to start businesses and do better for themselves. That's going to be the problem we have. China, India, and spoiler alert, Africa will be the next frontiers for growth. Soon, China and India will be too expensive, and we're going to start getting labor from Africa. Why? Because Africa is a fast-growing continent with very, very inexpensive labor. I mean, how much does I wonder what the per capita income is in Africa right now. What would you guess, Mo?
Oh, geez. Less than 5,000?
Let's see here. Overall? Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, because the highest is 30,000. That's Seychelles. Libya is 23. Egypt is 13. Egypt's like, oh man, what's going on, bro?
Oh, their economy is just destroyed.
Let me see what the per capita in China is. 12.5. I said 10 to 12. In India is 2250. I said 2,000 to 3,000. Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, look at this. 18% increase from 2020.
Wow.
We're not going to have 18% increases in our...
It's impossible.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Not going to happen. And then look at the United States. 70,249 in 2021. I think 2022 was 75. A 10.5% increase from 2020. Wow, okay. But look, India was 18% higher.
Yeah.
Guys, these are the things that I just look at thinking to myself, let's just stay calm. Join our webinar, April 18th. It's a 30-minute webinar. It's so short. It allows me to talk about the way we look at investments. You'll see our software. This is what I'm trying to do for why I created this. This is why I like teaching, because I want people to think just a smidge differently. You know, I'm on Twitter, and I see all the statements that are made, and I just chuckle. I'm like, oh my God, why do they worry about this? Why do they worry about these things? Just like Warren Buffett. It's so funny. People, make fun of Warren Buffett goes, yeah, that doesn't affect me one bit.
Yeah.
And I like that way of living, because guess what? Go back to 1981. I was born in 1981. The S&P was at 110 in 1981. It's currently at 4,100. What's happened in 1981? We've had wars. We've had assassination attempts. We've had terrorist attacks, tons of terrorist attacks. Yeah. It's like, and guess what? We had a great financial crisis. We had a dot-com bust. We had a real estate bust. All these things happen, and the S&P is now 40 times larger almost. Yeah. Now, it's overpriced, but even if it falls in half, it's 20 times larger over a 40-year period. Right. So guys, subscribe to the channel. Sign up for this webinar. It's going to be a great webinar, April 18th, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It is free. It's only 30 minutes. Sign up today. Thanks very much, guys.